Yo, what's up everyone? In this video, we'll be talking about iteration control structure, also known as loops. So, stay tuned. As usual, all the notes and the code are available on GitHub, and the link to the GitHub repository is available in the video description. Iteration control structure, also known as loops, repeat a block of code as long as a condition is true. And there are two main types of loops, that is the while loop and the for loop. And we'll discuss all those two types of loops in this video. So we'll start with the while loop. So a while loop, its syntax is you write the while keyword, then you write your condition, then you put the full colon, then inside there you put the block of code that you want it to be repeated as long as this condition up here is true. So for example, if you want to if you want to print to the terminal numbers 0 to 5, you can use a loop to do that. So first, let us see how we'll do it without a loop. Then now let us see how we'll do it with a loop. If I were to print numbers 0 to 5 in the terminal, I'll use the sequential control structure. I'll just say print, then I'll say 0, then I'll duplicate that line 5 times, then I'll just change here to this 0 to 1, this one to 2, this one to 3, this one to 4, and this one to 5. Then if I run this code, you'll see in the terminal I'll have printed 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you can see it's there 0 to 5. But loops help us to simplify our tasks by doing exactly the same thing, but now we'll be using loops. First, to print 1 to 5, I can create a variable which will hold the number. So I can call that variable count. And I'll give it the initial value which I want my start value to be. So I want it to start from 0. So I'll just say 0. Then I can use the while loop. So I'll just say while. Then the condition is when I want the loop to stop. So I want the loop to stop when the value of count is less than or equal to 5. So as long as the value of count does not meet this condition, so if the value of count exceeds 5, this code will stop. Then what I want to do in this loop, I just want to print the value of count. So at first it will print, it will check if the initial value of count is 0. So it will check if the value of 0 is less than or equal to 5. That is true. Then it will print 0. Then after printing 0, I also want it to increment. So I'll just say, I'll increment the value of count. So I'll just say count is equals to count plus 1. So what I've just done, after printing the value of count, I'll increment the value of count with 1. So in the next iteration, the value of count will not be 0, it will be 1. So it will check if 1 is less than or equal to 5. That is true. So it will print 1 in the second iteration. Then the value of count will now be 1 plus 1, that is 2. Then in the third iteration, since the value is 2 is less than and equal to 5, true, it will print 2. So it will continue checking if the value until where it reaches 5 and 5 is equals to 5, true, it will print 5. Then it will increment the value of count to 5 plus 1, that will be 6. Then now it will check if 6 is less than or equal to 5, which is false, and our code will stop there. So basically that is how a loop works. So if I run this code, I expect it to print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it does exactly that, 0 to 5. So you have seen we can save some lines of code. So instead of using this many lines, we can save them with these few lines. So now imagine if I were to print 1 to 100. I could have written print statements 100 times. But with this code, I'll just have to change the condition. For example, if I wanted to print 1 to 100, I'll just change the value of 5 to 100. And I have printed the values 0 to 100. Instead of writing print statement 100 times, I'll just use the while loop to do exactly that. And if I run this code, you can see it print from 0 up to 100 in the terminal. So I've saved over 90 lines of code. You can see it prints 0 to 100 using just 4 lines of code. And if I used print, it will be a lot of lines. So basically, A while loop has three parts. The first part is called initialization, where you initialize your start value. Like here, our start value was count and it was initialized to the value 0. The second part is the condition. The condition is under which condition do you want your loop to run. So this is the condition. So in this code, our condition was that as long as count is less than or equal to 100. Your condition can be anything. The next thing is the update. This part is the update, where you increment your, or you can increment or decrement your start value depending on what you want. For example, if I wanted it to start from 100 to come down to 0, my initial value could be 100. Then instead of incrementing the value of count, I could be decrementing the value of count. Then also the condition could change. Now could be as long as the value of count is greater than something, greater than, let's say greater than 0. So as long as the value of count is greater than 0, this code could run. So you can just save this so that you can confirm it's true. So expect it to start from 100 to come down up to 0. Because as long as the value of, you can see it will start from 100 up to, so it stopped at 1 because 0 is not greater than 0. So if I wanted to include 0, I could just put here is equal. So as long as count is greater than or equal to 0, it will include 0. So now if I run this code, it will print from 100 down to 0. So it will start with 100, then it goes down up to 0. So that is how you play with the loops. So I call it ICU just for easy remembrance. I just say every loop, this while loop has this ICU. I for initialization. So before you write a loop, you have to initialize it first. Then a loop has to have a condition. Then the part that most people forget is this update. So this part is there. If you don't put this part, your loop will not even make sense. You'll be stuck in something called a infinite loop, where your loop will no longer stop. So this update is important. So if you don't include this update, your loop will be stuck to an infinite loop. You can just confirm that. Maybe if I remove that update, this condition will forever be true and the loop will never stop. So if I run this code, so you can see the loop will run forever. It will just print 100 in the terminal forever and it will never stop because this condition will forever be true. That is because I'm not updating my count value. So if you don't consider the update part, you'll be stuck in a infinite loop. And to get out of this infinite loop, I have to press Ctrl and C. That is called a keyboard interrupt, and that will stop the loop. So that is how you get from an infinite loop. So basically this ICU is what I use to remind myself when writing loops. So I'll just undo to return that part. And this part, this loop body, you can just put anything. This print count is just an example of what you can do. But you can just do anything. For example, I can just put here something like, instead of printing the count, I can just print something like hello world, or let's say good morning. Let's say you want to send good morning to your, or let's say something like sorry. Let's not say good morning, let's say sorry. Let's say your girlfriend or boyfriend asked you to apologize. You can just write this simple code that will print sorry 100 times. And maybe you can excite them and they might forgive you. So you might consider that as a plus. And you got it from your boy, Kalito Daniel. So the next loop that we learn is this one called the for loop. So in Python, to write a for loop, this is the syntax, just write for, then a variable there, then the keyword in, then the thing that you want to loop. Then inside here, you can write the code body. Okay. So for for loop, you just write like that. For example, and for loop iterates over a sequence. That is the keyword to note. For loop only iterates over a sequence. A sequence is something like a list, a tuple, or a string. For now, we have not talked about lists or tuple. So I'll just iterate through a string because that's what we know. So I'll just create a simple string. I'll just say name. Then I give it a value of, let's say, Mary. Let me just comment out this code so that it won't run. Okay, you can just continue. Then if I want to loop through this sequence, Mary, I can just say for, then I can just put anything. Let's say I can say for character, for car in, then the variable name, like name. So this one is, I can't say it's initialization, but yeah, this is any variable name you can put here, then in name. But this in most cases, this variable name has to make sense. Like you can see here, if you're looping, this is a list. Let's say you are looping through this list, you have to say, it's a collection of a lot of things, so it will be plural, like fruits. So you have to say for fruit in fruits. So here I don't know what I can put, but as long as it makes sense, it's not a must to have the same name. But this one is the convention. It's the convention where you put the singular part here, because in most times the sequence is always in plural. So you put the singular part this side. Okay. So I'll say for car in name. Then let me just print the characters in Mary. So I can just say print, then car. So this car stands for each individual character in the string Mary. So if I run this code, I expect to see M, A, R, and I. And you notice that this 4 does not have this update, because you have seen that it loops through a sequence. So if this sequence is over, is when that loop will stop. This loop will stop if this sequence is over. That is the default nature of that. So if I run this code, it will just print M, A, R, and W, then it will stop there. So you can still print Mary, M, A, R, and Y, then it will stop there. Because by default, in a for loop in Python, as long as the sequence is over, the loop stops. So that's how a for loop is, just simple. And we'll come back to for loops later and learn about some things like lists and tuples. But for now, let us just stay with that, looping a string. So that is it for this video, guys. We'll talk about break statement and the continue statement in the next video. So see you there. Peace out.